So the breaking point really came for me when I'm like, I'm leaving the US, I'm done with it all, was when I wasn't feeling well. And so my doctor sent me to get some blood tests done. That same day after I got the blood test, I went that morning, because I had been fainting. Every time I would stand up, I would just faint. I had our dog Honey at the time. Every time I would stand up, she was right by my side. She just would not leave. She would not leave my side. I'm like, okay, something's wrong. Animals know. So went that morning for the blood test. That afternoon at maybe 1 o'clock after lunch, my doctor called me up. He's like, you need to get to the ER right now. I said, well, what's wrong? And he's like, your blood levels are not good. Your hemoglobin is really low. He's like, you are really severely at risk for a heart attack. That's how low my blood levels were. I said, well, I can't do it today. I'm like, I need to go home and get my kids. Is it something I can go do tomorrow? So I went the next morning, dropped them off at early care, for school, like I always did. And then I drove myself to the ER, and I had to get a whole bunch of blood transfusions. So I got 2 blood transfusions. And even after that, well, I had to go pick up my kids because where, the hospital was compared to where we lived was about an hour's drive. So I told them I have to leave at 5 because I need to get to my kids. Because we didn't have a community that could help me get the kids, or anything. And I was sort of closeted about, even with my coworkers, about what was going on. And I know if I had told them, a lot of them would have stepped up and helped, but I'm just very independent. So I just didn't do that. But yeah, so they wanted to keep me overnight. They said your levels are still too low. They did more tests, and they're like, your levels are still too low. I said, well, can I just come back tomorrow? I'm like, I can't. I have to go. So I left against medical advice. And yeah, while I was on the hospital bed getting these blood transfusions, I had told my boss I wasn't coming in today. She was still messaging me, emailing me. When can you have this done? When can you have this done? I'm like, I am in the ER right now. I told you yesterday I was in the ER. That was when I'm like, I am done. I'm so done. So it was on my hospital bed that I typed up my resignation letter. I had a friend look it over before I turned it in. And when I came back into the office, I didn't go back until the next week because I'm like, my doctor's like, no, stay home. You need to recover. And in case you need to have more blood transfusions. Handed in my resignation notice, and she tried to talk me out to leaving. And I'm like, I'm giving you 3 weeks. That's it. And I'm done. But yeah, turned in my notice and packed up. We took a month and a half to pack up everything. It was either pack, sell, or donate, or trash. And so we did all that in a month and a half, and we were gone.
Welcome to Travel of Legacy, a podcast that highlights and celebrates the experiences of Black and Brown families who use travel as a means to create and build a legacy. Hear the stories of Black and Brown parents who are building a nest egg of long-lasting memories, resiliency, and worldly perspectives for their young ones. I'm Melanie, the host and creator, the Trinidadian Canadian mother of a pink-obsessed and awe-inspiring princess. Travel of Legacy is a collection of stories that serves to inspire those who are yet to take the leap, so together we can leave behind a world filled of Black and Brown global citizens.
Feeling stuck and yearning for a life of adventure? Meet Nicole, a single mom of twins. In this episode of Travel of Legacy, you'll hear that after leaving her federal job in the U.S., Nicole set out to reconnect with her twins by exploring the world. Living with spina bifida and raising a son with autism, Nicole's journey is a testament to resilience and embracing life's challenges head-on. With a mindset of there has to be better, Nicole has flourished despite her challenges, finding joy and growth in every corner of the globe. From Mexico to Colombia, Scotland, South Africa, and now having settled in France, Nicole proves that with determination and a spirit of adventure, anything is possible. So get ready to soak in some valuable tips on making family travel accessible and finding resources to help prepare you and your family for a move abroad. Nicole's insights and experiences will leave you feeling empowered to see the world with fresh eyes and approach your own adventures with a renewed sense of courage and curiosity. To begin, I asked Nicole to describe her early experiences and memories with travel and to talk to us about how her love for travel came about.
Yes. So I actually grew up in a military family. So my mom was in the Army. So I grew up traveling. I was born on an Air Force base in Virginia, and then a couple of years after that, we moved to Germany. So when I was 2, I got to visually see the Berlin Wall. So I have memories of that as a child. But yeah, we were stationed in Germany and as well as Japan as well. So Camp Zama. And then we lived on Okinawa because my brother was born prematurely. So we had to go to the Okinawa where the military hospital was. And then we've also lived in Hawaii. But yeah, we've always just moved every 2 to 3 years to different bases. So that's where my love of travel came from, because I love experiencing the different cultures and meeting different people. Yeah, I just love doing that.
A huge part of many people's introductions into travel happens at that college stage. So I asked Nicole to talk to us about whether she did any traveling during those pivotal years.
So for my undergraduate, I attended 2 different schools, but at the last school, that's where I felt more settled and felt like I was actually being seen as a student. So in the first school, West Virginia Wesleyan College in Buchanan, West Virginia, I did my studies in international business. It was something my mom pushed me to do. She's like, go where the money is. But I didn't like it. And so when my friends left that school, because it was a private school, so it was really expensive. So when my friends left, I got kind of sad. I went to Augusta, Georgia, where we used to be stationed at Fort Gordon. And it was at this school, Augusta State University, where I switched to sociology. And then this whole world opened up to me. Like, I'm like, okay, I felt like finally found the program and the study area that was for me. And so one of my favorite teachers was Professor Ness. He had a love of South Africa. So I took one of his classes on South Africa, and he did this annual study abroad trip to Cape Town, South Africa. So I was a single mom at that time. Well, yeah, at that time when I went to Augusta State, and I was reluctant to leave my kids, but my friends were all pushing me because I never had a break. So they were all pushing me. So it was my first mom break. And I went to a foreign country. I went to Cape Town, South Africa for the first time. It was absolutely amazing. We toured the campus, University of Cape Town, and I just fell in love with that campus. I fell in love with the area. I fell in love with the people. We went to this restaurant called Mama Africa, and they did traditional dancing, traditional food. They would paint your faces, and it was just a really, really humbling experience, especially when we toured one of the townships. Because as a mom, I felt that these moms living there with their kids, and I'm thinking, okay, I have a lot. I don't think I do, but I have a lot. So it was an eye-opening perspective when I went there.
We then continued on, and I asked Nicole about her travel experiences after college. Here's what she had to say.
Yes. So when we actually left the U.S. Is when I did some schooling abroad. Well, before I left, I was doing a master's program with the University of North Carolina, Greensboro on, I cannot remember the program name, but it did had to do with community building and mediation. So I was still in this program when we left the U.S. and when we were in Medellin, Colombia, I had to do a practicum. So like go to a community organization and volunteer there and just write a paper up on it. I so it wasn't part of the original program, but I just included that so it added a little flair to my program. But I also study abroad. Well, not study abroad. I studied in Scotland, the University of St. Andrews, for my second master's in social anthropology. And then I ended up going for my PhD in University of Cape Town. So I went back to that same university that I fell in love with. But I didn't finish the program because I just did. I did my two masters and then I did my PhD all back to back to back. So I had no break. So when I got to the PhD and I just burnt overload. So I'm taking a break from my PhD, but eventually going to go back for one.
So, of course, many of you tuned in knowing that Nicole's travels took her all over the world. So I asked her at what point did she decide to leave the US and to describe those events or maybe a single event that led up to that decision.
Sure. So our life in the US actually was, well, it was a cumulative of things. So when I was in school, we just had my Social Security disability to live off of. And almost every single month, had to worry about electricity being cut off because wasn't receiving child support, wasn't receiving anything. So it was just this little stipend that I had to take care of us. Luckily, since my mom was 100% disabled, I was able to get funding from that. But I volunteered I joined the AmeriCorps Vista program, just trying to get some extra income coming in because it was tough buying food and paying for childcare because it was cheaper for me to get a nanny to come in when I was in school versus putting my kids in daycare. But finally, that just was enough. So I applied for a U.S. federal position with the USDA, U.S. Department of Agriculture. And we moved from Augusta, Georgia to Loveland, Colorado. And so there is when my kids were they were in a language immersion program, school actually, to learn French. And yeah, so then they would go to daycare. But even then it was a struggle. It was always a struggle as a single mom because the daycare was as much as our rent. So it was very expensive. And child support was coming in, but it was still not regularly. So I got tired of the cold and the snow because it affects my chronic nerve pain. So we moved to, I got a job transfer to Raleigh, North Carolina. So that was the closest I could get to DC without being in DC because I grew up in DC area as well. We were stationed there. So I wanted to get back to the East Coast North area. But again, it was a struggle. It was a struggle. And my health deteriorated with this job because I had a micromanaging employer. Yeah, it was just a lot on my body and I barely saw my kids. It was just a rough life. I did not enjoy it. I wasn't happy. My son was going to therapy as well for his autism. He was going to occupational therapy, autism therapy, speech therapy. And even though I had two health insurances, I still had a lot of copay. So a lot of health bills, even with two insurances, a lot of medications. It was just a lot. So yeah, it just wasn't good. I felt like I was barely making it.
At this point, I wanted to take a deep dive into this part of Nicole's story. And I asked her to describe what it was like making the preparations to leave, what emotions she was going through, what thoughts she was having, and how it felt, the experience of actually leaving.
Originally, before I took the job transfer to North Carolina, I had already been looking at moving to France, going to eat. I was working with consultants to help me move. They were doing it for me for free, helping me to figure out how to move to France and which would be the right area for us. I guess cost wise, because I was planning to just go back on my Social Security disability because I just was tired of it all. I'm like, there has to be something better, but that didn't end up happening. Because I got the company. I mean, the boss I was working for wanted me to stay, and she just wanted me to transition to a different position. So I went to that position, and this was a boss who was, like I said, micromanaging. And it was just brutal. I took over this fleet program, for vehicles, for government vehicles, and it was just very taxing on my body. She was expecting me to work on the weekends, work after hours, and this was a set salary position. So there was no overtime. There wasn't any of that. So the breaking point really came for me when I'm like, I'm leaving the US, I'm done with it all, was when I wasn't feeling well. And so my doctor sent me to get some blood tests done. That same day after I got the blood test, I went that morning. Because I had been fainting. Every time I would stand up, I would just faint. I had our dog Honey at the time. Every time I would stand up, she was right by my side. She just would not leave. She would not leave my side. I'm like, okay, something's wrong. Dogs, animals know. So went that morning for the blood test. That afternoon at maybe 1:00 after lunch, my doctor called me up. He's like, you need to get to the ER right now. I said, well, what's wrong? And he's like, your blood levels are not good. Your hemoglobin is really low. He's like, you are really severely at risk for a heart attack. That's how low my blood levels were. I said, well, I can't do it today. I'm like, I need to go home and get my kids. Is it something I can go do tomorrow? So I went the next morning, dropped them off at early care. For school, like I always did. And then I drove myself to the ER, and I had to get a whole bunch of blood transfusions. So I got 2 blood transfusions. And even after that, I had to go pick up my kids because where, the hospital was compared to where we lived was about an hour's drive. So I told them I have to leave at 5 because I need to get to my kids. Because we didn't have a community that could help me get the kids, or anything. And I was sort of closeted about, even with my coworkers, about what was going on. And I know if I had told them, a lot of them would have stepped up and helped, but I'm just very independent. So I just didn't do that. But yeah, so they wanted to keep me overnight. They said your levels are still too low. They did more tests, and they're like, your levels are still too low. I said, well, can I just come back tomorrow? I'm like, I can't. I have to go. So I left against medical advice. And yeah, while I was on the hospital bed getting these blood transfusions, I had told my boss I wasn't coming in today. She was still messaging me, emailing me. When can you have this done? When can you have this done? I'm like, I am in the ER right now. I told you yesterday I was in the ER. That was when I'm like, I am done. I'm so done. So it was on my hospital bed that I typed up my resignation letter. I had a friend look it over before I turned it in. And when I came back into the office, I didn't go back until the next week because I'm like, my doctor's like, no, stay home. You need to recover. And in case you need to have more blood transfusions. Handed in my resignation notice, and she tried to talk me out to leaving. And I'm like, I'm giving you 3 weeks. That's it. And I'm done. But yeah, turned in my notice and packed up. We took a month and a half to pack up everything. It was either pack, sell, or donate, or trash. And so we did all that in a month and a half, and we were gone. So I actually planned a lot of our move in the hospital bed after she was sitting up and like, nope, I'm done. going to my plan B. So I was a part of a lot of world schooler groups, like world schoolers. We are world schoolers. No, sorry, that wasn't around then. It was just world schoolers, and then another group called Wondering Moms. So I was I had already been in these groups because I had met a mom when I was living in Loveland, Colorado. Both of our kids went to the same daycare. And it was actually her who opened me up to this world of world schooling. I had never heard of it before, but she had done that lifestyle with her daughter, and before she moved back to the States. So I was just in awe, and we connected, and we're still friends. And yeah, so I started researching like the ease, like best places to go, quickest place to go, cheapest place to go. So Mexico was one of those. And so I didn't want to go to Mexico where everyone was going. So I didn't want to go to Cancun. I don't want to go to Guadalajara. I wanted to start someplace where there would be a lot of tourists or whatnot there, but it would be a lot of locals as well. So our first stop was Mazatlan, on the west coast of Mexico, near Baja, California. I mean, yeah, Baja, that side. We just spent. That plan went awry after a month of being there. But yeah, I planned everything in the hospital bed. I was completely done.
You would have also gleaned from the description of this episode that Nicole suffers from disability spina bifida, and her son Ross is autistic. So I asked her when she contemplated the move whether or not she harbored any concerns about how she and her kids might adjust.
Not really, because Ross had been in autism therapy. He had been in all these therapies to help him with coping skills, and I learned, delving into the world of autism as a mom, I learned what stemming was. So like I knew when he was about to get agitated, but I knew that he could do well with traveling, because we took a trip when we were living in Colorado. We actually took a trip, a cruise, a Disney cruise. So we had to fly from Colorado to Florida. And I just saw how alive he came when just at the airport traveling, and how he became so independent. He wanted to go and read the travel board to see when our flight would be and what gate. And he was very organized. So I found what worked for him, what kept him calm. And yeah, so we took the cruise and he did completely fine. There were some issues on the way back when he didn't understand the TSA part of them taking his luggage and scanning it, and there may be some things that they need to take out because he had his inhalers in there, and so he got very upset with that. So that was one instance where he did have a meltdown during that, and I couldn't calm him. But there was this this Black female TSA agent. She took us aside, took us to our own lane, because I think she recognized what was going on, but she helped calm him down. She explained everything to him. She was just very attentive. But yeah, so I knew when I was in the hospital bed, I knew there'd be some challenges with this, especially in a foreign language. So I took the time to learn the basic words for our disability. So in Spanish, autism is autismo. So I learned that so people so it could be understood. But yeah, for my disability, because I take so many medications, it was just making sure that my medications would be available to me in Mexico, and just finding out what the process was for that. Making sure that we had travel insurance, travel medical insurance that would cover us when we were doing all this traveling, because our plan wasn't just to stay in Mexico, it was to country hop. So we needed good travel medical insurance that would follow us. And that's what I found through, we used at the time GeoBlue. And my kids also have access to TRICARE, which is the military insurance. So I knew they would be covered as well. So yeah, like I said, I was making a plan because I had already initially started this back in 2016 before my plans changed. So I had sort of a starting point already. Yeah, but no, I yeah, stuck to it.
So, having made the decision to leave the US, I asked Nicole to recount the first country or city that they landed in and to describe that experience.
Okay, sure. So we started out in Mazatlan. I had actually booked a rental condo that we were supposed to stay in for 3 months because we were originally going to stay that in one spot for 3 months. And then move on to another place, so another country, because in Mexico you can stay there for 180 days. No, sorry, you can stay there for 3 months, visa free. So that's what we were going to do. This condo was advertised as having a working elevator because it was on the top floor, and it was advertised as having a pool as well. But when we got there, it was very hard to get an Uber just to transport. I mean, just to get into the actual town. It wasn't as close as was advertised to activities. So and then the elevator broke down a month in, and they had no idea when it would be fixed. And I'm like, yeah, this is not going to work because we have to bring home groceries. I can't climb up 3 flights of stairs every day. I'm like, this is not going to work. And then as well, the pool was under construction for the entire month we were there. And it was just no end in sight. So I'm like, I said to the people, just, can I have my deposit back? We're just going to leave at the end of this month. And so through my friend, who I met in Colorado, she connected me with someone who was in Mexico already on the West Coast. So it was this little town called Chicala. It was really, really cute, but it was not for me. So we stayed there one night, no, 2 nights, because we were originally going to rent this apartment that the friend of a friend found for us. But it just wasn't handicap accessible for me. It just wasn't going to work. So we actually stayed with her. But my kids got to play with her kids. She would take them to the beach while I would stay back and just try to plan where we're going to go next. While they were gone, I just hopped on Airbnb and I'm like, okay, let's try Guadalajara. Let's try there. So I actually found a great Airbnb in Guadalajara. It was a new, now I would never do this. I would never go with a new Airbnb host, but, he was a new Airbnb host. It was a new apartment. Everything was brand new in there. And he was just really nice. And cause I was low on funds. So I'm trying to think, where can we go? What can we do? So we booked with this guy and it was a special going on. So we got it at a discount. But before we could even move into that one, no, sorry, let me go back. Yeah, we were on limited funds. So we were going to go to Guadalajara, but we ended up having to stay with a woman first in a room. So all three of me and my kids in a room, a private room with a private bath. So we did that. Because I was waiting for, that's right. I was waiting for my pension from the USDA for them to give that to me. So we stayed in this private room with this. She was a chef, a baker, and so we actually explored part of Guadalajara with her. We went to Jalisco, which is where tequila is made, and we did a tour of a tequila factory. We even went to Chuck E. Cheese with her. So it's, again, these different experiences that we wouldn't have never had. And my kids and I were just going with the flow with everything. And yeah, we did go to that place in Guadalajara. Yeah, so we did those 3 cities during our first time in Mexico. And then we went to Medellin. Yeah.
I then asked Nicole to talk us through the many countries, cities that she and her kids have traveled to.
Yeah. So yes, so we've done, we lived in Mexico. We've lived, and in Mexico, we lived, like I said, Mazatlan, Chapala, Zapopan, Guadalajara. We did Merida as well. Didn't like that. Didn't like Merida. It was way too hot for my liking. I just couldn't handle it. And then we went to Colombia. We did Medellin. I absolutely loved Medellin, and I wish we had actually stayed there. That was one of my favorite places. Just the people, and as a vegan, I could eat there. It was just awesome. And my kids were thriving. I was thriving medically. It was just a really, really great place. And then after where else did we go? We went to Scotland because I went there for a master's program, to get my second master's. And so we were at I was at the University of St. Andrews. And we actually got stuck there during COVID. But it was a really great place to actually be in during lockdown. So I felt every place we've been there for a purpose and for a reason. And it's turned out to be good. And then so after St. Andrews, we went to Cape Town, South Africa, so I could do my PhD there. That didn't turn out so well, but we met some great people. I broke my knee there, so that added on to the stress of like me not liking it. And it was still during a little bit of COVID lockdowns. So it wasn't the Cape Town that I remember from when I went in 2013 for study abroad. So it was just a completely different experience. And doing it with kids, it really opened my eyes of how sheltered this place was and how unsafe it was really for my kids, and how they lost their freedom from living in South Africa after living in Scotland and being able to walk around by themselves. They couldn't do that anymore in South Africa. And then after South Africa, when I left my program, we went to Portugal. We lived in Lisbon, and then we lived in Porto. Out of both of those, I loved Porto the best. That place was really cool. And then from Portugal, we left there and we moved to where we are now, Limoux, France.
We interrupt the story to deliver a very important message. If you're liking what you're hearing and want to learn more, please like, share, subscribe, and leave us a review. Anything you can do to help us out would be greatly appreciated, as your support will go a long way in keeping this podcast alive. Thank you. Now, through my research on Nicole, I discovered that she had an episode on House Hunters International, and that is one of my favorite shows. So I was able to watch the episode, and it took place in Scotland. So I asked Nicole about how the opportunity came about for her and her kids to come on the show.
So I actually met someone in Mexico, in Merida, Mexico. She had been cast to do House Hunters in Merida, and the producer that she was working with was actually looking for more people. So I connected with this producer, who I'm actually still I'm friends with on Facebook because we keep in touch. And yeah, she casted me for our move to Scotland. So yeah, that was such a great experience. I got to we got to go to places that we never would have gone in the St. Andrews Dundee area. We met some local business owners, and it was really nice. It was really cool. We got to try some different restaurants, some restaurants that are now my favorite. And every time we go back to St. Andrews, we go right back to those same restaurants. We ended up, one of them, it's called the Doll's House. We ended up becoming a regular at the Doll's House. We would go once a week. And they knew us. We had our set table whenever we would come in. Even now when we go back, we have our set table there. But no, House Hunters was such a cool experience. Even though I'm an introvert and having people stare at me while I'm filming, especially in public spaces, that was kind of a lot. But it made me open up. It made me have more self-confidence in myself. Well, this is a company that wanted to hear my story, thinks I have a story to tell. And yeah, it was, I just really appreciate that experience.
We then moved the conversation to talking about Nicole and her son, who both suffer from disabilities. I asked her whether or not she and her family have experienced any discrimination or bias, and to recall an experience that stood out.
So as far as us being, well, with the disability, I would say, because I fall a lot. I have balance issues, even though I walk with a cane. But I found that in Mexico, whenever I would fall, or both in Mexico and in Colombia, whenever I would fall or I just needed help, people were so quick to help. It was very much a community feeling, where in the U.S. is more individualistic. It felt different there. I remember one time I fell on the sidewalk, and this person, all of a sudden, I felt people lifting me up, and I'm like, oh gosh, okay. But it was just really, it was just a different experience, because that never would have happened in the U.S. People would just look at you and stare and not help. But yeah, I mean, so yeah, that with my disability, yeah, it was a good experience. For my son's disability, for his autism, no, because he has this big afro. And so our hair, black hair, is different. And so people would always touch it without his permission. And so that being touched is one thing he does not like, he doesn't like being touched by strangers. So I would see a lot of the times people sneaking and touching his hair, and then he would freak out and he would run. One time it happened in an elevator, and I saw this guy do it, and I just looked at him. I gave him the death stare, and he just cowered in the corner. I'm like, no. I'm like, all I just said was no in Spanish. I mean, well, no in English. And I'm so glad he didn't feel it, because he just touched the top. He didn't really dig his hands in like people normally do. Because I stopped him from going any further. So my son didn't run away. He didn't even notice. So that was a good thing. But yeah, a lot of touching without a permission, a lot of stares. Yeah, just a lot of, I remember one time we were in Merida. That's where I really felt the racism in stores, because I would carry around this little book bag purse, because it was easier for me to carry my stuff around like that. So I had this little purse, yay size, and the security guard said, you need to lock it up. He's like, you can't have book bags in here. I'm like, it's a purse. So he's like, it's too big. And I'm like, that white lady just walked by with a huge purse, and you're not stopping her. And he's just like, no, because your bag is wrong. And I'm like, you're not taking my bag, because I'm like, this is my purse. So I walked away, and he ended up grabbing me by the book bag and jerking me back. And I'm like, I will call the police, because you're touching me without my permission. But eventually he let me go in, and we got what we needed, which was just a fan, because where we were staying, there's no fan in there, and I was getting heat stroke. So I'm like, we needed a fan, and this was the only place we could get the fan. But yeah, Merida, I was followed around by security in different stores. I'm just like, how am I threatening? I'm like, I'm walking with a cane. I'm like, I can't even run from you, and you're following me around. And a lot of the people I knew there didn't believe me that this was happening, but they saw it one time when we went to a store. They were with me, and she's just like, I see what you mean. They are following you. They would follow me up the aisles. If I would go down one aisle, they would be right at the end. And so it was just there. Yeah, yeah, the racism, and that was another reason why I didn't like Merida. It just wasn't clicking for me. But the one place I did feel comfortable as a black person, a black American or a black female, was actually in Medellin. I felt safe there. I felt welcomed. It was just a completely different experience. And I think that's why that Medellin is one of my favorite places, because everything clicked. Everything. My son wasn't touched. People respected his personal space, and it was just a great experience. Yeah, no issues with racism there. It yeah, I just felt like we were one of the locals, and we were really immersing ourselves into the local culture, or local community. I'm sorry, but yeah, Medellin was that has a special place in my heart.
I then asked Nicole to provide some recommendations or tips for parents who want to travel with their autistic child and may have some reservations about it. So I asked her specifically if she has any tips on how best to prepare, managing sensory challenges during travel, and finding inclusive activities and accommodations.
I think it's how you approach things with your child or someone who has autism. It's learning what sets off a meltdown, how to recognize their stemming issues so you can prevent them from escalating into a meltdown. It's preparing them mentally and physically for just the aspect of traveling. So that means practicing what's going to happen at TSA, at security. You may be patted down. Someone may have to touch you to pat you down if you set something off. You may need to speak up for yourself about this. I mean, people being in your bubble. You may have to do this because it's part of their requirements, their country requirements. So just having conversations like that with your child or the person with autism. I know in the U.S. There's TSA Cares, and they will actually you can bring your child with a disability, and they can do practice runs with the TSA on what's going to happen, what could happen when you're going through security. It takes them through the airport and just helps them to get aware of the surroundings before they actually physically do it on that day. I never did that with my kids because the airport that we used to travel in DIA, Denver International, I learned a lot about the disability rules with TSA from that airport. I remember you always hear you can't travel with a bottled water when you're going through TSA. And I remember one time I went through and she saw medication in my bag. And she's like, "Do you need to take this medication now?" I said, "Yes, but I'm going to get a bottled water through there." And she's like, "You know what? You're legally allowed, if you're carrying medication, to bring an unopened bottled water with you. It doesn't have to be frozen like some people try." She's like, "You don't need to do that. You're legally allowed to bring unopened bottled water through TSA security because you have medication in your purse." So I'm like, okay, I didn't know that. And then that's how I learned about the TSA Cares, because we went through TSA. We always go through the disabled line because I always get wheelchair assistance. But yeah, even with autism, you can request disability assistance so that you can go through the disability lines. So then your child is not having to wait in the queue, especially if that's one of the issues with their stemming. You get not special treatment. You get guided assistance. That's a better way of putting it, through the airport, and you have a staff member that's there to help you. So that's helpful too. So you don't need to be in a wheelchair to get the disability assistance. You just have to have a disability. But I always say a lot of places say not all disabilities are visible. So autism is an invisible disability. So you can get that assistance. So I think a lot of people don't recognize or understand that it's not just for people with physical disabilities. So yeah, basically it's just me recognizing what my child needs, what what causes a meltdown. And it's just, yeah, me learning to take things slow with him. We always just get to the airport. I always get there 4 hours in advance. So we have time. We're not rushing through everything. We have time to slowly go through the airport and get to where we need to. We go to the lounge instead of the gate right away, just to be in a calm environment. So no, it's just me and the tricks that I've learned with my son on what works best, and how he thrives when we travel.
I always find this next question from a personal standpoint very interested because I myself am a single parent and I'm always open to any suggestions or different way of thinking of things. So I asked Nicole from a practical standpoint how she has been able to juggle it all when it comes to logistics and preparation while traveling and parenting on foreign soil.
It's hard. It's a different type of difficulty than in the US. So yes, in the US I was working and I had those struggles. But in a foreign country, it's especially if it's in another language, that just adds difficulties. I have to navigate my kids' schooling. I had to register them, and it was just a very non-practical way that they do it here in France. And it was just, to me, very convoluted. It wasn't straightforward like we're used to in like I'm used to in the US, or even how it was straightforward in Scotland. So it just navigating those different landscapes, I feel like I do more housework now, and housework is just not like cleaning and all that. It's just the managing of the house. I feel like I do more of that now, than I did before. I mean, it's the same, but it's different because now it's in a foreign country. I mean, a foreign language. So I'm having to Google Translate all this stuff, and it's difficult.
One of the things that I strive to do with this podcast is for the many stories and experiences to be a source of motivation, inspiration for parents who may be just on the edge of wanting to take that plunge into traveling or traveling more, but are hesitant for a variety of reasons. So I asked Nicole to impart in us any words of advice that she may have for parents who may be on that ledge, teetering on that edge, and are just unsure or hesitant. Here's what she had to say.
So I would say, don't be afraid. If you have the means and you can travel and you can or live abroad, do it. Life is too short to think about the problems that may arise. You may have those same problems in the US, and a lot of people worry about the healthcare aspects, but just have to research the places where healthcare is either low cost or it's included as part of you living there. So like in France, there's a social security system, which is a healthcare system. So a lot of the things for my medical are free for me. For the kids, a lot of it's low cost. And a lot of it you get reimbursed back by the social security system. And it's the same in Scotland. If you can go there, the UK, sorry, you have the NHS system. And it's just different in each country within the UK. So that's something to take into account. But I mean, there's options. It may be difficult to find like services. So like Ross is back in occupational therapy because he needed those assistants because the occupational therapy he received as a child, those needs are now different for him as a teenager. So I was starting to see that he needed to get some more occupational therapy, but it was difficult because it's in French. So I lucked out that I just Googled occupational therapists in Limoux, and I emailed all of them in French, and I said that we were Americans and we speak English, and if they could work with us. One of the people that actually reached back to me was a French American woman. So her mother was American, and she spoke English. I'm like, how great is this? So Ross still goes to her for occupational therapy. She speaks English. And yeah, so it's just, there are programs out there. There are people out there who, even in a foreign country, you can find those resources. Like for France, it's an Anglophone special needs group, for people moving to France who have special needs and need to find resources. It's called Sparks, I believe, but you write the secretary, you tell them what your problems are or what services you need, and they connect you with this whole resource of people. So again, there's networks out there. You just have to just do the research, and everything you need is out there. So everything you need in the US, you can find abroad, and probably cheaper and probably better quality as well. So again, don't be afraid. There's stuff out there. Yeah, and you'll see that once you get abroad. For me, my health has actually gotten a lot better. I don't deal with the issues that caused me to have to be flawed, that caused me to need the blood transfusions. I'm happier. I mean, some instances not happier like 100%, but happier than when I was in the US, because it's still a struggle with finding community and such. But I am overall happier that I'm living abroad versus living back in the US. So yeah, again, the number one thing is just don't be afraid. There's stuff out there. You can find a better quality of life abroad. And then even with just traveling, if you can't live abroad and you want to just do trips, there's all these wonderful groups. World Schoolers, We Are World Schoolers, Wondering Moms. If you're a Black, if you're a person of color, there's a group called No Madness Tribe. So, I mean, there's all these groups out there, all these resources, where if you have a question, you can go to these groups and get answers. Another group I love is Nomads Without Limits. He's great. James is great. And he's so encouraging, especially for people who have never traveled. But you'll find that all these encouraging people wanting you to get out there and travel, they will help you as much as they can because they want you to travel. And I'm the same way. So I always tell people, if you have questions about traveling with a disabled child, or if you're disabled, feel free to reach out to me. And I will help you the best way I can. I will help navigate you to the right resources, right groups, just so that you can do these things. Because I think everyone should travel. It helps open your mind. It helps you to become a more open and accepting person, I believe. Versus staying in one spot.
I then asked Nicole, just quite frankly, whether or not she intended to return to the U.S. to live.
So, no, I won't return back to the U.S. to live ever, unless I'm forced to. But I go back to visit occasionally. And when I do, it's very, very short trips. Because it's a lot. But I do miss Cheesecake Factory. I do miss that. And Panera Bread.
So as I mentioned previously, Nicole and her kids have been to many countries, and now they're settled in France. So I asked her how the idea of settling in France came about, why she chose this country in particular to settle down, and what were some of the considerations made in calling this place their current home.
I chose France because we originally were going to stay in Portugal for their retirement visa, but there's been such an influx of expats there that they were changing criteria all the time, and the cost of living has gone up dramatically. So for like renting an apartment there, we found a really loved. It was going to be 1,500 euros a month. And I'm just like, this is expensive. So it's not affordable. I'm like, that would be like it would take up a big chunk of my Social Security. So I just started researching countries that have retirement visas in Europe, because my intention was to stick with a country within the EU, so that we could attain citizenship. And then my kids could go to college anywhere within the EU, because I do not want them going back to the US for college. Because even with my undergraduate degree, 4 years, I'm like, it was expensive. I'm like, I don't want that for you. And I can't, as a single parent, I can't afford that either. So yeah, I looked at Malta first, but I didn't want to be trapped on an island. And then we looked at Italy. And speaking with some of the parents who were already in Italy, they stated that the disability services for kids in schooling was terrible. And they said it's terrible in France too, but it's a lot better in France versus Italy. So I looked at France, and I found the apartment. This holiday let that we stayed at had never ever been to France before. I don't count stopping in the airport for a layover, but that was my first time like stepping foot on French soil. And it was here in Limoux, and that's where we still are. And we actually just celebrated 2 years of living in France. So yeah, our plans are, again, to get citizenship. We can apply for it in 3 years, and I don't know if I will. I mean, I don't know if they will stay here or go to college in France or go back to the UK or whatnot. But I mean, they have options. They can go anywhere within the EU. I love that they have options.
I asked Nicole to reflect on how traveling has impacted her kids.
I have seen them come alive when we travel. It's different now when they're teenagers and you get those. It's hard to get them to smile when we first or take pictures. So I sent you the best pictures I could as they're older, where I could get for a little bit of smile. But yeah, when they were little, because they were, I believe, 7 or 8 when we first started, and they were just so full of life. They were ready to do anything. They would go up and talk to people. They would they were social butterflies. And we had a nanny, and we also had a house sitter in Medellin. None of them spoke a lick of English, but the relationship that my kids had with them, it was just amazing. They could communicate by doing other things, but the nanny and both of them would always hug and play with the kids and play with my kids, and my kids were just very bright. And I had never seen them smile that much, actually, compared to when we were living in the US. And then we joined these world schooling groups. We joined one in Merida, and my kids met some other kids from the US. Yeah, and they were playing and laughing, and it was just like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. Look at them playing with other kids and doing this in a foreign country and just being so open. It was a great experience. And then when we moved to Scotland, they became so independent. It was really cool. They would walk. I was nervous because in the US, I would always drive them to and from school, or we had a sitter that would do it. But they would walk the 15 minutes to school by themselves and walk back after school. They made friends in the neighborhood, and friends from school. They would go to the playground by themselves. They would go to the convenience store. So stuff I did growing up, they were doing this now in a foreign country. and they were thriving. They were so independent, and I just love that for them. Yeah, and now here in France, they're learning French, and it's been a little difficult, but they're doing it. They're both getting good grades. I'm just proud of the people that they're becoming from this experience, and it's a little different than my experience growing up, but it's for me, it's still the same. You're still growing up, being surrounded and learning about different cultures, different communities, different people. You're not just staying. You're not just you're experiencing things that most people read about. So that's what I wanted for them. Real world experience.
At this point of the interview, I asked Nicole to reflect on the journey that she and her kids have taken and talk to us about how it makes her feel knowing that there are many Black and brown families out there who are still hesitant to travel.
It makes me feel sad, actually. I mean, I can understand some of the sentiment behind why they have that fear. Some of it's financial, because yeah, you either need to have a good source of income or a job that allows you to work abroad, or have a business, or like me, have Social Security disability. Yeah, you just have to. Yeah, so there is the financial part that you do need to work out first before you can live abroad. But I mean, even if you are working a full-time job, I mean, there's still ways that you can still travel. It's just making travel, I guess, a priority. Even if it's just one trip a year, even if it's doing local trips, just go out and do it. Try it. Even if you can't leave the US. Or if you have custody issues where you're not allowed to leave the country, you can't fly to another country. You can do, there's workarounds. You can do closed loop cruises, so that start and end in the US. There's options. Because when I was fighting for custody for my kids, before I went for sole custody, we did a closed loop. We did the cruise on Disney cruise, and that was right when I had filed for custody, and that was something a law clerk said I could do. He's like, legally you can do that because it's a closed loop. So I'm like, okay, let's go do that. So yeah, there are options, and there's, like I said, there's groups out there who can help you find the information. There's the Wondering Moms group is a great example. Oh, I see this question in that group so many times about how can I travel when I don't have sole custody, or he won't give me permission, or I can't even find the other parent. I mean, these moms will give you resources about how you can apply for a passport without, I mean, if you can't contact the other parent or if you don't have sole custody. Like I said, these groups are full of information, and it's all about helping one another, because our sole goal is getting you to travel, especially kids. There's so many benefits to getting kids to travel. And that one aspect shouldn't impede, I mean, it shouldn't stop someone from wanting or traveling, period. But yeah, closed loop cruises, like that's like, you can still travel and you can still see different countries like that. It may be Mexico or the Caribbean, but you're traveling. That's the thing people need to stay with. It's traveling still. But yeah, it makes me sad when people don't think that they can travel because of all these different issues. Like I'm disabled. I'm still traveling. I'm still doing it because my life doesn't end just because I have a disability. It makes it harder. I still have so much life in me. I still want to go do things, and I still want to do that with my kids. Yeah. So it doesn't hinder me from wanting. I mean, it doesn't hinder me from traveling.
I asked Nicole to reflect on how traveling has impacted her kids.
So, I think back to, well, my own personal feelings of how I felt travel it opened my eyes to so many cultures. When we were living in Japan, yes, I went to school on a military base, but a lot of our teachers were Japanese. So I had a class in origami, and I had this teacher speaking Japanese. We were learning Japanese. And then when we lived in, when I got to do like a student exchange program. So I went to go live with a Japanese family, and then they got to come, and then that Japanese person came to my house. And then living in Hawaii, I got to experience those different cultures. Go the behind the scenes of how a luau comes together, like the digging of the pig, what the meaning behind that is. But all of that was me experiencing different cultures, me living this life, and again, doing things most people can only read about. So my takeaway, my hope for them is that they see that they've had a privileged life, a special life, that not most people get to experience. Hopefully, we'll see learning a different another language as a benefit, because it actually gives them a leg up for employment, because now they can go in saying they know 2 languages. So it opens more doors for them. Even if they don't want to do college, they can do a trade route here in France. So that's the school here is set up where you can either do trade or college route. But I mean, it's helping. They have opportunities. They don't just have to stay in France. They can go anywhere within the EU once we have the citizenship. But again, they have options. So I hope that they look back on this and see that, yeah, sometimes it was difficult. We were doing a lot of fast travel, but they got to experience so many different things. And I hope when they look back, they can see the benefit of it, and that they still have a love of travel, and that they still have a love of learning different cultures and immersing themselves in different cultures.
Thanks for listening to Travel Love Legacy. If you like the show, be sure to subscribe, rate, and review. Doing this really helps me to grow. And don't forget to follow us on Instagram at Travel Love Legacy. Till next episode, bye.